Welcome to Advisors on Growth. I'm your host, Derek Colin. In today's episode, we have Dr. Kent Wessinger. He is the leader in operating systems that help people with their careers. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fine. How are you doing today, Derek?
Perfect. Thank you for asking. So, can you share a bit about your role and how it fits into the bigger picture, as Dr. Kent Wessinger, what you provide in the services and how you help people?
Derek, I mainly help CEOs, executive teams, HR directors, and the way that I'm able to help them in just a simple form is I help them not only assimilate, but position that younger workforce that they have in their building for sustainable growth moving forward. There continues to be a high level of frustration between the generations. I say it's especially between like baby boomers and Gen Z, for an example. There still seems to be a high level of frustration and misunderstanding. And so I help them build that bridge. Now, I don't help them build that bridge just based on observations. I help them build that bridge because almost 10 years ago, a little bit over 10 years ago, I developed a research project hoping to get some understanding of why there was such a stark difference between some of the leadership methodologies and leadership ways of the older generation in contrast to the younger generation. And I specifically focused on baby boomers and millennials. Well, what is the difference there? And I developed a research project that has 30 questions in it that I asked baby boomers and Gen X 30 questions. I asked millennials and now Gen Z those same 30 questions. And I'm able to contrast those perspectives and help them to develop a pathway moving forward, help everyone, all leaders, with a pathway moving forward. When I developed that research project, I had no idea that it would take on the life that it did. It's an open-ended research project that, because I'm tracking the maturation of not only the younger generations, but I'm also tracking the retirement of some of the older generations. And that research project today has over 54,000 participants from 33 nations. It's been implemented in companies and organizations and government, over 100,000 employees down to 7 or 8 employees. And so the way that I'm able to help is I'm able to bring data, real, true, pure data to leaders, but I'm also bringing that implementation experience. So I help them formulate a strategy to position their younger workforce for sustainable growth and scalable revenue moving forward.
Awesome. And that's a part of your three wins operating system, correct?
That's part of the 3 wins, yes.
Awesome, awesome. So what major shifts are you currently seeing in your industry right now?
Well, first and foremost, I'm convinced of this, Derek. I'm convinced that millennials, and I'm not going to say Gen Z, millennials, according to the US Census Bureau, by the way, a millennial is defined born from 1982 to 2000. I'm convinced that millennials, when we look back 30 or 40 years from now, that millennials will be considered, if not one of the greatest generations in organizational history. And the reason for that is that that generation has reconstituted and even pushed back on processes that my generation, as a baby boomer, defined as absolute. And millennials have really, at some level, have been the tip of the spear in change in organizational structure, in change in process, in change in critical thinking skills. In change the way that they work, in change in the way that they live. And the question is, what have I observed that has changed, in the workplace over especially this last decade? It's the fact that now millennials are assimilating into leadership positions, and they're not backing off of those changes that they reconstituted in organizational structures. They're maintaining them and they're leading from the same position in which they had 10, 12, 15 years ago. And so I'm encouraged by the growth. I'm encouraged by the boldness, but I'm also encouraged by the positioning of that younger workforce, of how well they're doing, and not only positioning themselves for leadership, but positioning the generation Gen Z behind them into the workforce as well.
Oh, well, I'm flattered because I'm a millennial. And that's why we're here. We're here to have a meaningful principle to principle discussion on how we can help with impacting by providing, impacting the youth or, someone, whether they're millennial or not, in a meaningful way and provide insight and knowledge to help them advance, whether they're an entrepreneur or a business owner or CEO who's managing a company. And that's why we're here today, Dr. Kent. So how has this trend when it comes to millennials leading the way for Gen Z, et cetera, impacted your business or growth strategy?
It's impacting me in a way that I've realized, and it's not only in my company, in my organization, but in other organizations, because I have clients that I'm heavily engaged in with them, helping them develop emerging leaders and develop a clearly defined path of growth and success. It's helped me to understand the importance of culture. And I know that culture is a subject matter that we have been saturated with about the last 5 to 7 years. And I greatly appreciate the fact that people have focused on culture. And look, millennials, and I'll give Gen Z some credit here, they've brought this culture discussion not just from the periphery of organizational structures, but they've brought the culture discussion into the boardroom, and the boardrooms have responded. And what I've discovered is that many, I would even argue most organizational structures today, companies, profit, nonprofit, have great cultures. However, I've also discovered a weakness, and that weakness is that as the pendulum has swung to the culture side, and it should, and we've done a great job with it, what we've done is we've kind of closed our eyes or ignored structure. And what we know and what I've learned over the last decade is that you may be having talent, you may have a great culture, but you also may be having talent issues, and you may also be having revenue issues. Because what I've also discovered is that great culture doesn't necessarily retain talent nor drive revenue. We also have to have structure. And that's why I wrote the book, 3 Wins, and developed the 3 Wins operating structure, because I recognized what a good job that leaders have done at formulating and installing and keeping a healthy culture maintained inside their organization. But we also have to have a structure, an informed, tested, practical structure that will not only attract talent and keep that talent engaged and retain that talent, but also drive revenue. And that's where I really focus, is not so much on the culture side, but on the structure side of helping leaders develop that structure that will position them for sustainable growth moving forward, their company or organization as a whole, but
Mhm.
also their workforce.
Interesting. Very interesting. So it's not always about culture. I like that.
It's not always
Uh,
about culture. Culture alone will not drive revenue. Culture
yeah.
alone will not retain talent. Culture alone won't even attract talent. We have to
Yeah.
have informed, tested, practical system that partners, growth system that partners with that culture.
Hmm. Okay. A growth system that partners with that culture. Okay. And when it comes to implementing, your system, what is your approach, or how when someone comes to find you or read your book, what exactly initial steps that they need to take in order to get the process going, or do they bring you into the equations at some point? Let me rephrase that. When an issue may arise, or a CEO or founder needs your help, when do they typically bring you into the equation?
Well, Derek, I have to tell you, I'm going to back up one step just before that question. When a founder or a CEO or an HR director, or whoever it may be, reaches out to me, they've heard me at a keynote, a Vistage talk, a EO talk, something like that. When they reach out to me, The overwhelming majority of them reach out to me highly frustrated because they've tried everything to get the
Yeah.
younger workforce engaged and retain
Mm.
them, even attract them. They've thrown a lot of things against the wall and very few things are worked. They've expended a lot of resources, whether it be money or time, and very few things are working. So what happens is they reach out to me frustrated, but I don't really receive their tone as frustration. I
Mm.
receive it as a metric in my research. And what I mean by this, in January 2020, right in the heart of the pandemic, I drew a line in the research project because I wanted to see how well things returned back post-pandemic, especially 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years out like we are right now. And there have been a few metrics that we have returned to, a few behavioral patterns that we've returned to. But there's also been some metrics that the divide has gotten greater since January 2020. And
Mm.
the metric that disturbs me the most is this, that in January 2020, 48% of all leaders said they were concerned about the future of their company or organization as it pertains to the younger workforce. 48% in the metrics world is it is a grand slam. It's a slam dunk. It's
Yeah.
a touchdown. I mean, it is a huge number.
Yeah.
Today, though, that number is 83%, is exploded to 83%. 83% of all leaders, baby boomer and Gen X leaders, are concerned about the future of their company or organization as it pertains to the younger workforce. Well, what I know is this, is that leaders that function or lead from a position of concern, they're leaving outcomes open to chance. They're leaving their future uncertain. And what happens when you lead from a position of concern, because it creates concerned behavioral patterns all through the organization. My seat of observation has showed me that a concerned leader always ends up in a place of conflict inside their organization. The antithesis of that is a confident leader. Now, I'm not talking about an arrogant person. I'm not talking about someone that has all of the answers. I'm talking about someone that's confident in the outcomes because they're using an informed, tested, practical system that has proven itself over and over again. What I know and what I've observed is that leaders that are leading from a position of confidence are not only getting growth outcomes, they're getting exponential growth outcomes. They're also attracting great talent, young talent. That young talent is highly engaged, and that young talent is not only retained, but that young talent are becoming business builders inside of their company and organization. But let's back up. 83%, over 8 of 10 leaders are leading a position of concern. The end result is going to be conflict. Only 17% are leading a position of confidence. The outcome is not only going to be growth, it's going to be exponential growth. So when leaders call me, my first response is to help them make that change to transform from a concerned leader to a confident leader. And that methodology of getting them to that place where they know when they walk out the door of whether it's a keynote or a conversation or me in their building helping them, when they know that they walk out the door and they are walking out with confidence that this system is going to work because it's worked over and over and over and over again, they're leading discipline changes for the good.
Awesome. Well put, very well said. So, what's working well for you right now and, what's been frustrating?
There's still a lot of older, seasoned leaders that are struggling with one issue as it pertains to their younger workforce. And that one issue is accountability. My observation, and even the metrics show this, that leaders, especially seasoned leaders, are getting more and more timid about holding people accountable for their actions inside their building. And what we also know is that accountability is not just a component of the foundation of growth, it is the sole component of the foundation of growth. We build everything else on the foundation of accountability. And where we have accountability being timid or fading or non-existent, we creep closer to the place of conflict and chaos. And so when leaders call me, one of my first response is to help them understand the way the younger workforce, the way the younger generations see accountability. You see, the older generation can only see accountability through a hierarchical structure. It's almost military, from the
Yeah.
top down. They keep every layer accountable. The next layer keeps the next layer accountable, and so on and so forth. However, your generation, especially your generation, has come along and said, that's not the accountability that works for us, which makes leaders lose their mind, seasoned leaders. And the reason they lose their minds because they're saying to themselves, how else is accountability supposed to work? And
Yeah.
so what I explain to them is this, that accountability is no longer hierarchical, it's reciprocal. In other words, they hold you, the younger workforce, accountable for productivity, for time, for outcomes, whatever it may be. But now the Dereks and the Millennials and Gen Z are holding the leadership accountable for some structures of growth and success. And what we know is where those structures of growth and success are non-existent, or they're not clearly defined, or they're just random, good talent, high-yielding talent, top talent is not staying in those organizations. And so then leaders go, wait a minute, you're telling me that the younger workforce wants to hold me accountable? And I'm saying they do, and they will. And so your choice is to be held accountable and experience a tremendous amount of growth, or your choice is not to be held accountable and watch talent just continue to come in and out the back door. And so, and there's a sub point to that. What I also know from the metrics and the implementation experience, that millennials and Gen Z, they don't want their leaders just to hold them accountable. They're begging their leaders to hold them accountable. They want to be held accountable. They don't want accountability to be a fleeting subject matter in their organization. They want accountability to be maintained. And so it's not that your generation is pushing back on accountability. It's that your generation is saying we need to have accountability throughout all of the organization, not just from layer to layer.
Yeah, makes sense. So where can people find your book, Dr. Kent Wessinger, and what do you want someone to know about the book?
They can find the book. It's called 3 Wins, and it's about turning talent uncertainty into predictable growth and scalable revenue. Where they can find the book is they can find it on Amazon. They can find it at drkentwessinger.com, either one of those places. But what I want them to know about the book is this. I've had this extraordinary blessing, Derek, to help a lot of leaders not only go from a position of leading from concern to confident, but position their younger workforce for sustainable growth moving forward, which ultimately produced business builders and revenue generators from those employees. I've had this beautiful and blessed opportunity to do that. However, there's only one of me. And I'm in DC, Baltimore, Philadelphia, Charlotte, Winston-Salem, every single month helping clients. And so what I made a decision to do was to write a book that puts it all out there, step by step, a playbook, if you will. It's an operating system, and it's been tested over and over and over again in all different forms and sectors of the economy and organizational structures with companies of all different sizes. So if you will, and look, I wrote this to be short, to the point, in very direct, in a way that leaders can take this information and if point A, and if they'll do this and follow through with it, which is very practical and easy, everyone can do it, they're going to get the outcomes that I talk about all through the book. So the book is not only written on the research project, but it's mainly written from the perspective of this is what happened when we implemented these things. And those 3 wins are simply this, that we attract with clarity, we engage with accountability, and we retain with community. And so when we can enforce those and build those 3 wins, when we win those 3 wins, we know what kind of growth outcomes you're going to get.
Awesome. I love it. I gotta check out that book. So, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Kent Wessinger, thank you so much for joining us on Advisors on Growth. If you guys want to check out his information, it will be in the description below. That is 3 Wins Operating System, which is trademarked, and that's Dr. Kent Wessinger, drkentwessinger.com. Thank you.
Thank you.
Pleasure.